Stand by. 10 seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, folks. Hello. Welcome to tonight's FFSI.
FFSI. It always sounds like a stutter.
Yes, it does. It does. But anyway, we are going to talk about a old radio show tonight, which
Called Let's Talk Geeky.
which returns this Saturday.
I know I keep interrupting your intro. What a bad person I am. You just have to throw me in the water.
Tonight we'll be talking about these three legends here. Once I bring it up on screen, there we go.
You can only see two of them because you actually are right in front of Harry Seacombe.
Yeah. And I'll end up knocking my green screen a little. Yes, so The Goon Show. The Goon Show. Who vaguely remembers it?
Well, I have seen it. It's been years, obviously. But
Really?
although those three, the Goons were four.
That's true.
Michael Bentine was part of it, but he wasn't a major part.
Yes.
See, I remember the stuff that they all went on to do, except Harry Seacombe. Well, Peter Sellers went on to do Pink Panther, the movies and such like Doctor Strangelove and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mike Milligan went on to do the Q series.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Bentine went on to do Potty Time. And Harry Seacombe did some comedies. And he sang, but I think out of the four of them, he was the one that not lost his way, but didn't have the same impact. I know people say Michael Bentine didn't have the same impact, but I remember him from Michael Bentine's Potty Time. It was roughly the time I was a kid watching it.
Yeah.
So for that, Harry Seacombe, I saw him in a couple of movies, but it wasn't like the Peter Sellers movies. He was a star in it.
Yeah.
And whereas Harry Seacombe was was he in? I think he was in a couple of Carry-Ons. Maybe.
Harry Seacombe.
Maybe he was in that type of movie. He was in that type of movie, not necessarily the Carry-On movies, but those types of movies.
Yes.
The early comedies, the tongue-in-cheek, peer-side postcard type of movies. But he just didn't have the same impact as the other ones did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I remember from it. Harry Seacombe was better known in the Goons than he was for anything he did after it.
Well,
whereas Spike Milligan was known more for the Q series.
Spike Milligan was a complete nutcase genius.
Yes. Well, you look at one of his favourites, his famous sketches. He couldn't remember. He couldn't actually think about how to finish it. So they used to do that as they would all stop and go, "What are we going to do now?" and take steps back. What are we going to do now? And eventually they would walk off the stage. And in the middle of a scene, they would just stop and go, "What are we going to do now?" and just start walking off. And people are going, "Huh?" But he was more famous for being that bit of a nutcase.
Yeah.
And then you've obviously got Peter Sellers. He was in Sykes. He was in the Pink Panther movies, Doctor Strangelove, and he did other stuff, but he was just one of those.
Got married to Lynn Frederick, lucky bastard.
But he was just one of those character actors. He made it famous. But
but judging by Peter Sellers' like film career, right? He has done quite a lot, you know.
Yep.
And you know, starting off like with the Ealing comedies, right?
And
then he moves into Hollywood, you know.
Yeah.
I think the Hollywood film that made him famous was it Goodness Gracious Me? No, it was
Goodness Gracious Me, that sounds more of a Spike Milligan movie.
no, the song was Goodness Gracious Me, wasn't it?
See, the only thing about Goodness Gracious Me I remember was the sitcom with all the Asian actors. They did the one going for an English. They remember they were talking to the waiter, calling them jammies and stuff like that. Something bland and uninteresting. That to me is one of the funniest sketches because I can see a load of English guys used to do that with the Indian. They would always mispronounce the guys' names, and that's why they did it. Going for an English, they were just taking the mickey of and switching it when people would go for an Indian restaurant. But Goodness Gracious Me was the type of thing I would watch, as it were, because I like the sitcoms type. So I don't recognise Goodness Gracious Me as a movie.
I think it was The Party, actually. No. Here we go. Yeah, the film that made him really famous was Lolita, and he was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. But what really took it off was The Pink Panther.
Well, obviously, because he was just so good in that. Him and Kato.
And of course, why is it a misnomer to say that anybody played the Pink Panther?
Because the Pink Panther was a jewel, was a diamond.
Pink Panther was a gem.
Yeah.
Which everybody forgets.
Everybody thinks, yes, Peter Sellers played the Pink Panther, but he didn't. The name of the movie was all about the jewel heist.
Yeah.
Stealing the Pink Panther. But it didn't help it that when they did the cartoon, the Pink Panther, they had the Cluzo character there as well.
Yeah.
So it sort of mixed and mashed it together, and just that's why they stuck with the Return of the Pink Panther. Pink Panther Strikes Again. I've got the full set of all the Pink Panther. There's 6 of them, 5 of them from one studio and 1 from a different studio. So if you want to get all the Pink Panthers, you can't get them in a box set. You have to get the box set with the 5 from one company, then you have to buy the other one separately.
Because didn't you have the Son of the Pink Panther?
And
then you had because one of them was a clip show, a clip film, wasn't it? Showing
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think the 5th one was almost like an interview. They were talking to him, and it was basically they were showing different clips because he was saying, "Yes, my father and his chief," and then they would show the guy try to kill him.
Yeah,
and then they would talk about Kato, and then they would show clips of him and Kato fighting all the time. So it was a bit of a clip, but it was actually done like they were interviewing the son. I think it was the son. So I can't remember off the top. I need to actually dig out my database to see what movies are what, but
well,
I've dug out a load of DVDs because I've been watching I watched The Blacklist. Wasn't as keen on that. I liked a few of the characters and they were really good, but all the characters around them were an absolute nightmare and I didn't like any of them.
Mm.
I've watched, dug out my DVDs for Farscape, just finished watching that, and I think I remember it better when I had it in VHS, which I've still got the VHS tapes, but I've just finished that and I'm watching Digging for Britain. And I think I will have to dig out my Pink Panther movies and rewatch them. Just for the simple fact is, and I've been talking about the goons is reminding me of certain movies I've not watched for a while.
Well, I'm looking at the episode titles. The first two series were untitled, but the third series of the radio play, or the Goon Show, is that you had they did a Christmas pantomime of Robin Hood. You know, that would be fun as hell. But and the fourth series, you got one called The Dreaded Piano Clubber, The Man Who Tried to Destroy London's Monuments, The Ghastly Experiment of Dr. Hans Egenberger.
What show was that?
These are the Goon shows, the titles of each episode they did.
Right.
The first Albert Memorial to the Moon. The Missing Prime Minister. Oh, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Crumb.
Aye, they basically they would actually take things that were there and then they would literally mess around with the titles.
Yeah.
Because as we were talking about this earlier, Monty Python. There were forerunners to Monty Python. Monty Python were heavily influenced on them.
Yes.
It's the same as there is a lot of movies and TV shows after that, which were Monty Python sort of emboldened them, but it does go back. It's the same as like a lot of comedians were interested in comedians of an early date who were interested in people like Oliver Hardy, Stan Laurel. So they would go out their way to try and meet them. And then other people would come through and try and meet them. So it was almost like a stepping stone. So you could go back 2 or 3 steps, and even shows now who will reference shows that gave them the influence. And if you look at that show, the people in that talk about the reference they get, which eventually goes back to the Goons. Because anything that's got a wee bit zany, it takes stuff and switches it on its head. Russ Abbott, Cooperman and Blunder Woman.
Yeah.
If you look at who Russ Abbott got his influences by, then it's the same idea. It would go back a couple of stages, and the Goon Show would be one of the ones. It would be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just, I'm also looking at the 1 million penny.
I think I'll have to actually go and actually dig this stuff out. Hold on.
But I know you had like Wings Over Dagenham, but Dagenham wasn't even set in it.
Right.
Colin, if you ever listen to these, you'll probably burst out laughing.
Hey, I've not heard Colin laughing unless somebody's mispronounced something. He doesn't laugh.
I do if I find something funny.
Aye, that's what it says. It doesn't. You don't laugh at comedy. You just laugh at people's mispronunciation or misremembering. I'm just saying they're no lying through their teeth that they remember something, but they misremember. That's what I'm saying. Honest, Gov.
I'll trust you.
Aye. So see, the Goon Show,
Mhm.
the things that stuck in my head are things like Eccles and stuff like that.
Yep.
Parts of the show, a lot of the show I wouldn't be able to actually remember and tell you about it, but there's one or two characters. Some of them I don't even remember the names, but I remember the characters. But Eccles was the one stood out, shall we say.
Yeah.
And
Also,
the, voice, the
sorry.
voices as well, can't you? You saw
Yeah.
some of the things you remember are the voices as much as anything
And
else.
that's exactly it, the voices, because you think about the Eccles voice. Throw him in the water. Peter Sellers is one of his. It was even one of his favourites.
Is that the one? There's a line from something that Ian Reddingate keeps quoting. He's fallen in the water from some recent TV show or something. Like, I wonder if that's what he's referred back to then.
It could be, and if somebody said he's fallen in the water and they say it with a slightly higher pitched voice than their normal one,
yeah, that's what Ian sounds like when he's. I think it's from something, because it's one of these ones he keeps like quoting up bad things. So it's something like what was the really bad Star Wars ripoff? Rebel Moon or something like that. I think I know it's one of the things that's got slammed recently that he occasionally has been known to use that as a quote. So that must be where it's from then.
It could be. It's one of their most famous characters, Eccles.
Yeah.
And that is one of his most famous catchphrases, shall we say. And most people know that reference rather than a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it could easily be. I was watching something else.
Yeah.
And it was the same idea. Somebody fell into the swimming pool, and one of the side characters says, "He's falling in the water." But they said it their normal voice, but slightly higher. So, and that's what it reminded me of.
I don't think they can get that high pitch.
No, but I think if they did it higher pitched, it would be more of a what's the word? It would be more of a piss take. Whereas he said it in his normal voice, but just a wee slightly higher pitch.
Yeah.
Basically, it'd be like me saying he's falling in the water, but saying it with a slightly higher pitch. He's falling in the water. You're not changing it to be like Eccles, but you're doing it in a way that it references it.
I mean, it even makes it sound funny.
Yeah.
Just partly, I think, because you're obviously putting on a voice. Obviously, you're putting on an accent there. It's falling in the water. It's clearly not your normal voice. So I think that's part of the comedy for it.
Aye.
Well, I just want to bring up, all right, so you had the main character, Neddy Seagoon, that was featured in it all the time, right? And frankly, it was just Harry Seagoon. But Spike Milligan, he played Eccles, Henry Crun, and Minnie Barrister, right? But he also played a side character to Peter Sellers' character, which was Hercules Griffin Vine, right? But the character was Spike Milligan played was Count Jim Moriarty.
Aye, that's true.
Yeah.
The Moriarty was one.
Yeah. And Moriarty had various names. Who has played in the male lead in 50 French Postcards, Minister with Underpants of the Principality of Monte Carlo, Champion Barbed Wire hurdler until the tragic accident. Gypsy saxophonist to the House of Romanov. Scupper royal and noted amateur postman. And husband extraordinary by appointment to the House of Rita Hayworth. So, despite was a genius when they were coming up with these characters.
See that, that again?
It's a style of. I mean, some of them are obviously riffing on other characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. A lot of the characters were so like it'd be like Sergeant Major Shut Up. Remember Windsor Davis?
Yeah.
That was based on the Sergeant Majors used to see in the old movies.
Yeah.
He just took it and made it hilariously funny by playing it straight in a comedy.
Oh, yes, you lovely music.
Come to think of it, PJ, would you say, and it's literally just occurred to me, connection, would you say the Sergeant Major character would be the English version of what the Americans would do would have as a gunny? You think the gunny in Full Metal Jacket, for example?
A gunnery sergeant. Aye.
I'm just. I mean, because they're obviously not the same, but they're different militaries. So I'm just thinking, Sergeant Major. I'm just thinking Windsor Davis and Arlie Irby. Oh God, there's a pair you.
See, Windsor Davis is probably near Bilko than he is. Gibbs. He's nearer Bilko than he is Gibbs.
Yeah, true. But I'm just thinking that as in the case of in the cultural.
I think a gunnery sergeant. I think is a gunnery sergeant is a higher ranking. See, remember the sergeant major is the highest ranking non-commissioned officer.
Yeah, the highest ranking officer is WO. Does it go 2 or 1? Such as an RSM. And I think a gunnery sergeant is. I'm just thinking in the zeitgeist, if you like to say that where in the British military.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what the highest ranking non-commissioned officer is. It a gunny?
Well, I've got a feeling that I don't think they have gunnery sergeant majors anymore. Anyway, I think they did away with the rank, but it was because it was a Marine. I mean, it's a Marine rather than an army. But I'm just wondering if within anything related to military circles, if what in British TV and film would be a sergeant major would perhaps in an American version be a gunnery sergeant major rather than a sergeant major from the army. I'm just wondering if the two are sort of have got the same sort of resonance is perhaps the word I'm looking for there.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, based on TV shows, in the American Army, the sergeant had the 3 stripes, but the gunnery sergeant had the 3 stripes, but there was also 3 stripes at the top over half moon above them.
Yeah, they've got a weird system because I know gunnery sergeant was actually a Marine, not an army rank. Because in fact, thinking about it, actually, Sergeant Major Shut Up was gunnery sergeant major, wasn't he? Because he was what we might remember, but it ain't half Hotman was actually about an artillery unit.
Yes, because they were gunnery.
They were actually gunners in the night. They were actually artillery.
Yes. Because what do you call him? Windsor Davis, Don Estelle and Melvin.
Melvin used to be with Cliff Richard.
because Melvin was played. Was it? What was it? They used to call her some. They used to call him something.
Yeah. Oh, because
It was the Dorothy. It was something like that.
Yeah.
So, but he was the only the Scots one and the son. Lovely boy. The three of them were actually
Melvin Hayes.
Melvin Hayes, that's it. They were actually artillery, but you had Don Estelle, remember with his wee pith helmet?
Yep.
He technically wasn't, but he was moved there because it was a concert party, so he got drafted into it. And according to
IMDb, they're all down as gunners. So you've got Battery Sergeant Major Williams, Bombardier Gloria Beaumont was Melvin Hayes, Don Estelle was Lofty.
Gloria, that's what it was. They used to call him Gloria. You had
they're all down as gunners apart from the gunners or bombardiers.
Was Don Estelle, as in, was he all of them down as gunners? Because I think because of the outfits they wore, based on just the outfits in the show. Lofty with his pith helmet, and then you had the piano player who was the intelligent one with the glasses, the baldy guy,
Paderewski.
Gunner.
They're all down.
They're all gunners because they were transferred into the concert party.
Yeah,
but they weren't actually gunners. Whereas Lofty and the piano player, I don't think they were transferred in because of it. And so did the thingy's son got transferred in. So they were transferred into it because it was a gunnery. It was a concert party, which was started as the artillery.
Yeah, maybe they got transferred in. I say because George Layton and Melvin Hayes are both down as bombardiers, which is I think is a corporal, and all the others are gunners.
Aye, they were because remember he kept going on about his third stripe.
Yeah,
but
Alec is probably gnashing at the teeth because we were talking about a Reinhold Botman, which may have had connections to the Goons.
These are programs that the Goons sort of thing, because you can see in the way certain people play characters, they play them to they play it straight, but an absurd straight. Because you look at a lot of comedies after the Goons. You look at a lot of comedies before the Goons. They were like Alistair Sims in St. Trinian's. He played that as a comedy. He didn't play it as an absurd character. You had Flash Harry was a bit more absurd as a character. George Cole, he played him a bit more absurd, but he didn't play him over the top absurd. They played him like a bit of a wise guy because that's the type of character he was portraying. But you look after the Goons, whereas you had Dad's Army, you had what was his name? Remember the Flash Harry? He always
I know.
Music.
So he played it a wee bit more absurd. Then you had things like Mannering. He played it dead straight, but he played it so absurd. It was funny. And to me, playing them absurd seemed to come after the Goons, because people actually took that and says, well, I can still play him straight, but I can play him to the absurd level of straight that it's funny. Whereas the Goons, because the Goons took like prime ministers and stuff like that, they took things that were they basically took something that was so a straight lace type of thing, and they took it to the absurd level.
Well, I think the Goons were also part of. I mean, I didn't listen to Goons. I did listen. I did listen to Round the Horn. which was slightly later, and a Contemporary, but which was similar but different. But they all came out. They all
What did
came
you
out
call him
of
with the big bushy tash? I can't even remember his name. It was on the tip of my tongue.
well, Kenneth Williams, of course, was in there for start. But I'm thinking they came out of that, and the Goons, that, and also things like that. That was a week that was to a degree. They sort of came out of this in where they started, I think, doing the satire as well.
Yeah, and you look at things like the Navy Lark, all come after, and that was the same idea. It wasn't a comedy as such; it was more of an absurd comedy where you had John Pertwee doing all the voices, similar idea to the way the Goons used to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's the same. It was the same idea. It was a case of they played it more absurdly, and it's, to me, it's because the way the Goons portrayed things, it sort of put that into the zeitgeist of how to play characters. See, I can use big words as well, Alec.
Yeah.
Zeitgeist.
You can use German words as well.
90% of my words are one syllable. Huh? But I think the Goons definitely launched. They were the ship at they were the face that launched 1,000 ships.
Yeah.
The Goons were the Helen of Troy.
Well, thin end of the wedge. I thought we taken right. They started that whole. I think they probably did start it.
They probably did, because if you look at a lot, or even listen to a lot of the early radio comedies where they had the characters weren't the absurd characters. You had they would take something like, if he was a Flash Harry type of character, they always giving him a bit of, you know what I mean, and all that, and they would give him the Cockney characteristics of the wise guy. It's the same as if they wanted to portray somebody as mean, they always had the Scots accent in there because he was a wee mean man. But whereas the Goons
stereotype,
anything and made it so they didn't necessarily stick to the type of characters you would expect. Like Eccles, any other show it had an Eccles, that Eccles character would be the wee weedy character. It wouldn't be, say, Booty a Goose. Whereas the Eccles character in the Goons, he was played to an absurd level that he wasn't bullied all the time. He would just come out with stupid things, but you never felt as if it was a character. It was the wee weedy character. It was, I'm sorry, but he fallen in the water, and he was a side character. They always portrayed him as a main type of character. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you had that type of character, they would always be portrayed in a particular way because they see, before the Goons, they used to see a type of character they want to portray in a particular way. So the wise guy, it would always be a Cockney. The miser would always be Scottish or something like that, and the put upon character would be the one with the wee squeaky or high pitched voice. Whereas the Goons took that and made it a character, not just a caricature. And I think since then people stopped caricaturing them and started making characters of them. Does that make sense?
They definitely started some of that, didn't they?
And to me, it's definitely it definitely launched. I would say even launched a few careers, because I think before that people would have just sort of looked at somebody like Spike Milligan and thought, he's not getting a show, he's not getting on, he's an absolute nutcase. Whereas after the Goons, they realised that people like nutcases. So a lot of people probably who wouldn't have got a chance got a chance.
Right. I'm gonna share a audio clip with you from the Goon Show.
Uh-huh.
I'm hoping we're not going to get pulled, but you know, it is absolutely funny as hell. What's it? Hello, PD Rich.
Bloody hell, really?
Yeah.
When it's at Plummet, it was nice and warm early on. Or, well, sunny-ish.
Sorry for the background noise, but Philip's watching Bedknobs and Broomsticks. So, anyway, here's the audio clip. Have a good old listen, right?
Uh-huh.
Here we go.
But that same night, a muffled battleship sailed silently up the Thames to the Pool of London, carefully aimed its guns, and as dawn broke...
Hands up, England!
Your money or your life!
Right, Moriarty. Grab the mullah and the BBC megaphone and full speed astern.
But that same night, a
You would get that joke, wouldn't you?
Uh-huh. I remember one of them. It was just a part of a wee sketch where it was Peter Sellers, I think.
Yeah.
He came in with his deerstalker hat and his darling hunting jacket. And it was just, for some reason, that wee sentence stuck with me. Because he's taking the piss out of the deerstalker hat.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a deerstalker hat and his darling hunting jacket. He got up with the crow. How the crow got into his bed is unclear. It was the things like that. It was, and the thing that struck me was Hector Nichol. I'm actually watching a Hector Nichol one on YouTube. Scottish comedian. He used to do that. Chick Murray used to do that. I mean, I was walking along. I was walking along the road. I was walking along the road, and a guy was unscrewing a fence, a gate. I didn't want to say anything in case he took offence. Yeah, I mean, that's Chick Murray. I was eating a biscuit, and a woman says, "Could you throw my dog a bit?" So I picked it up and threw it across the road. Walked into the bank and says, "Could you identify yourself?" So I took a mirror out and looked and says, "Yep, that's me." But that's the type of thing that Chick Murray became very famous for. He would take the stuff. Whereas I remember it earlier from the Goons with the deerstalker hat and the darling hunting jacket. I got up with a crow, how to get into my bed, that type of thing. You know what I mean? I was walking down the road in my trousers. How the road getting into my trousers, I don't know. So it's things like that.
You did get some of that also from around the horn, as well as that sort of very clever play on words and language.
Yeah,
not even a pun really. Not even that subtle as a pun. It's more.
Well, Spike Milligan came out with this joke about what Peter Sellers did to him once, right? And what it was is that one day, early in the hours of the morning, or was it late at night, Spike Milligan gets a knock on the door. And as soon as he opens the door, there's Peter Sellers standing there, bollock naked, but he's got a bowler hat on, he's holding an umbrella, and he's like wearing shoes. And he goes, "Excuse me, sir, do you know a good tailor around here?" So that's how mad they were, completely mad they were.
Yeah, because some of a lot of it is juxtapositioning your what you're saying with the situation, or deliberately misunderstanding a particular word or particular meaning of words,
Yeah.
Well, they were very much that was a. I mean, the thing, because the other thing is, of course, is that with radio, you have to do everything by sound.
Yeah.
You can't have you can't have a comedy that's visual, because there are no visuals to it. It has to be.
Actually, there was somebody who proved you wrong in that.
Who?
There is a comedy that is very visual, but if you just listen to the audio, it is that good that you don't need the visuals because you can picture it.
Mm.
Do you know what that is? I'll give you an example. What starts with come here and ends in ouch? I don't know, sir. Come here. Ow! Blackadder.
Yeah,
If you listen to Blackadder on audio or you listen to it whatever, it is absolutely. When you're watching it, it is so visual. All the jokes, the faces, everything is very visual. But if you're just listening to the audio of it, it's as funny because you don't need the visual, because the way they're talking, they don't need to describe anything that's happening around it, but you can hear the comedy.
Well, it's written it's written partly for the audio to come.
That's what I'm saying. Whereas on the radio, they had to do everything by sound, but once they went on to the TV, a lot of it was the look of the characters as well as the sound that made it funny.
Yeah.
However,
well, I was going to say, comedians Mitchell and Webb, and also Matt Lucas and David Williams.
Yeah. Don't like Matt Lucas and David Williams, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Britain and Mitchell and Webb started on radio themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were radio. So the thing is, you got to really hand it to the Goon Show, right? Because a lot of sketch comedy on that you started on the radio first before they transitioned to the TV.
Yeah. Well, you look at a lot of, even up until the 90s, a lot of the TV comedy writers had at least a connection to, if not started out in radio.
Yeah.
So you've got to crown your heart. So you've got to have the language. I mean, I take your point about Blackadder, PJ, but I would counter it by saying what that is. That is that they'll make what that is. That is good writing for a visual comedy. But so you've got the visual aspect and you've got the audio aspect, and the two complement each other.
Yes, they do complement each other. But what I'm saying is,
it would be difficult, for example, to do on radio, purely on radio, someone walking onto a rake and hitting a rake and the rake coming up smack in the face, because that's a very visual thing. Whereas if you set the situation up, then you can picture it.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I remember watching the first 3 Blackadders.
Yeah.
But the fourth one, I listened to it first. And I found it as funny as the 3 I'd seen. Because the visuals and just the way the jokes were lined up, you didn't need to physically see them. Because the writing was so good that it was perfect. Then when you sit and watch it, it was funny. Like, for instance, he was writing his poem. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
You didn't need to actually see a picture of Baldric looking like something that had been dragged through a trench backwards.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it was so funny that it painted the picture in your mind before you saw it. You obviously, because you've seen the earlier Blackadders, you know what type of character Baldric is. But if you'd listened to the second Blackadder on audio before you saw it, it would have been confusing because they switched Edmund and Baldric around. Because in the first season, Baldric was the brains, and Edmund wasn't. He basically was the thick one. Then from season 2 onwards, they switched it and it made it funnier. However, season 3 and 4 on audio is just as good. Season 2 is good, but not as good because if you've only seen season 1, the movement of the character. I'm trying to say that 3 times, but if they're trying to change the character's character, that's more confusing.
I know.
But it was still funny because it was written in a way. Ben Elton was good. He wrote some really good stuff. You look at the young ones as well.
Ben Elton, you mean?
Yeah. Because he wrote with some part of episodes and stuff like that.
Well, Bennett didn't Ben Elton come on for season 2 of Blackadder?
That's what I'm saying. He did some Blackadder and he did the young ones, but each of them, the writing is so well done that it helped it because it was visual and audio. It wasn't just one or the other. Because he's a talker and his comedy is wordy. It's basically, it helped the show. Whereas you look at the Goons, who was writing it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I was going to bring up this. The Goon Show didn't start till the 1950s, right?
Yeah.
But I think the Goons owed it to a lot of what was going on, the radio comedies in the United States. You know, because like, you know, you had what, the Cuckoo Hour, right? And that was with Raymond Knight. And that
Don't
was
remember that at all.
No, it was way before your time. But what I can say for our American audience out there, you know, if you say in the comments, if you remember like the American radio plays of what your dad showed you or your grandfather like recorded, you know, that would be great. But the thing is, with us and the Goon Show, radio was pretty much the standard because television wasn't like.
Aye, that's true. It wasn't in everybody's house until 70s.
Yeah.
The first big boom of television sales was 53 for the coronation. But as you said, even then it was a case of people gathering around someone who'd got a TV. But
so you would have 7 or 8 families sitting at somebody's house.
So as you said, it didn't become really widespread. Yeah.
But then the people started having TVs in the house, but they were still at a rarity.
Yeah, it didn't.
But as soon as it became colour and it was cheaper, because I remember when I was younger, Rent Granada.
Yeah,
Granada TV.
Radio rentals.
It was radio rentals. You would put 50p in it, and that would do you a day of watching TV. They had the meters on them, so you could put 50p in it, and that would give you 10 hours or 12 hours of TV for 50p and stuff like that. So I remember all that. So that was in the 70s where it became cheaper with the colour as well. That things you were still watching things in black and white. I remember when I got married the first time, I still had the black and white portable in the kitchen. That if the kids were watching something on the TV, I'd be watching the black and white portable because black and white TVs were still getting sold in the 70s and 80s. So they were still quite common, black and white TVs, because I had a black and white portable.
Well, I remember when we got our first rented our first colour TV, because there'd been a series because the BBC wasn't with us, was doing a series of science fiction movies, and the week we got the colour TV, they were started going back to old black and white. They'd been colour movies. The week we got the black and white TV, the week that we got the colour TV, was the week they went back and were showing black and white movies.
Yeah. I remember all that, and that's when we were watching reruns of the early stuff, like the Navy Lark and the Goon Show was on weekends. You were getting a lot of American stuff, Japanese stuff. Remember the Saturday mornings? You would get.
I didn't know Marine Boy was Japanese until this century.
No. See, I did, because the big eyes. I was told quite early on. I don't know if it was my dad or somebody else says you can tell it's a Japanese cartoon because of the eyes on the characters. Yeah, large eyes.
But I wasn't. I wasn't.
Remember you get Champion the Wonder Horse, American. You get Skippy, Australian. You got the French one. I can't even remember what the French one was called.
You got the ones. What you got? You got a lot of ones, European ones in
French and Spanish. They were all dubbed. I remember them.
You had the Flashing Blade. You had White Horses. You had
Zorro, American again.
What was the cartoon one? Crystal Tips on Alistair. You had a load on that pulled over.
Mary, Mungo, and Mitch.
Yeah,
English one. Yeah, I mean, so we had English stuff, we had American stuff, we had Australian stuff, we had French stuff, we had Spanish stuff, we had Japanese stuff, and you could tell the difference because at night, it was before the alternate comedians kicked in. You would get a lot of comedians that you could tell were sort of influenced by the Goons because of the type of characters they would have. You didn't have caricatures as much. You had characters that were weird. You look at Carry On movies.
Yeah.
Those were they were characters, but they weren't caricatures. So you didn't have the caricature of the oh Jesus, no Kenneth Connor, Kenneth Williams.
Yep.
His characters, because of his voice, sometimes they were overly masculine, even though he had the wee voice. Remember, I was once a weak man, once a week enough for any man. So you had Hattie Jakes and stuff like that. They would take their characters, and they would be ridiculous, but they wouldn't be caricature ridiculous. They would just be playing it straight. Like, I think that's the way the Goons did it. They were doing their comedy as if the characters were playing it straight, which made it ridiculous. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's the way I took that. They weren't playing it as a deliberate comic character. They were playing a comic character that didn't realise he was a comic. He was playing it straight. And that's made it ridiculous, because the thing somebody says when they're being serious is a lot more funny when somebody's trying to be funny.
I was going to say the greatest thing about the Goon Show is that they went off script most of the time, because you
could see that when they were actually when they were on TV, they were actually still doing the radio shows, but they were filming them. So the four of them were standing there, and you could see them basically cracking up.
Yeah, but it was great that they did it in front of a live audience.
Yes.
That's the thing. You know, because when they went off script, you know, they were recording live, for Christ's sake, so they couldn't, like, you know, they couldn't call it like a blooper or anything. They had to wait until the audience calmed down. So when I showed you listened to that clip earlier, they had to
they're
wait
laughing
for
over the top of it.
audience. Yeah, they had to wait for the audience to calm down a bit until they said the next line.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. When they started filming it, they didn't actually initially film the episodes as in situation comedy type.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, they actually filmed them actually doing it as a radio show. So they're standing with the scripts, and you can see them cracking up because somebody said something that isn't in the script, and they're looking and as if looking at them as if to say, "You bugger." It's which I found was quite good considering it was a radio show. It went on the TV, so they did it as a radio show.
And another thing is they had what you call musical numbers in between segments.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
you got a couple of them who could
hang
sing.
on.
Harry Seacombe could sing, but he could sing in a ridiculous way.
Yeah. But no, what I said, they had musical numbers in between before they came back. So it was like during the musical number, it was like a break for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before they come back on. You don't
Yes.
get anything like that anymore.
Well, a lot of it, and also I think a lot of it, part of it came out of the tradition of variety, musical and variety. So you did literally you would have musicians or something on, musicians or music being the most obvious one for radio, because of course it's not really a lot of use having the magician on the radio,
And also,
unless it's
Colin, I can actually prove you wrong.
Come.
Archie.
I was about to say, that's what I was thinking. I said, unless of course it's part of the shtick. So what I was thinking of is, and I was thinking another one like that. But that was obviously part of the shtick, part of the comedy, wasn't it?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. People would say things like, "He's a really good ventriloquist. He's actually on the radio." It could be two people for all you know, because it's on the radio. But that was one of the most popular characters of the time.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's on the radio, and people actually, if you said that to kids nowadays, they would go, "What?"
Yeah. Tell the kids they won't believe you. I know they wouldn't.
But
no, you're right. Exactly as I said. I mean, that was you had to suspend your disbelief. You had to suspend your disbelief in the complete absurdity of it.
Yes.
But that was part of the shtick. What I'm saying is that with a variety stage show, you could have someone come on and you can have someone juggling, you can have someone doing magic or whatever it was, but because it's radio, most of the stuff like music, most break is like to be something like musical.
But see,
that gives your main stars the rest. They did the same with again around the horn, and they had their house band. Oh no, I can't remember what they were. But again, they did the same thing again.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Whereas
so you'd have them come in, and you'd have a little
on the TV,
little
very rarely you had something that was live. So they would always, but even if it was live to an extent, it would be recorded live. But when it was recorded live, they would have a 30-minute intermission, so everybody could have a break, and the audience could go and get the toilet, go something to drink, something to eat, something, anything. They would have that, but you would just see the 5-minute adverts between the two shows, right? Because it was recorded live, but it was edited down, so that. Whereas in the radio, they couldn't do that, so a lot of the stuff was live and it was recorded live. So to give the main acts a break, they had to do stuff, and it was usually, as you said, musical numbers, because it wasn't even only a 10-minute sketch show. It was maybe an hour, so they needed a break, and that's what they would do. So they would have a couple of breaks with the musical interlude, and they wouldn't just play a song; it'd be maybe 2 or 3 songs, or so that type of thing. Yeah, but it just goes to show how things change.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention another thing. It wasn't recorded at the BBC. it was recorded at the Camden Theatre, the Goon Show.
Mhm.
You know, so it was actually recorded in a theatre. That's the best thing.
Yeah.
It would have been great. Well, if I had a time machine, and it would have been great to go back in time and watch it live. While it was
Oh
being
God, aye. There's a lot of things. Just to imagine going to the Panopticon and watching all of Stan Laurel do his first comedy show,
Mm.
dressed up with his dad's clothes and pretend, and he used a different name because he didn't want his dad to know he was doing it, because his dad was a manager of another theatre round the corner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would love, there's time machines. There's so many things I would love to go and see.
I still want to go back to Wembley. I think 1986 was it? To go and see Queen live.
See, I wouldn't want to go back to see something that's recorded that I could watch.
Yeah.
Recorded live. I'd want to go back and see something that wasn't recorded, but people have said so things about it. Like, for instance, I would like to go back and watch the very first 1 or 2 episodes of Doctor Who that got destroyed and it's never been seen again. I would like to go back and see Stan Laurel's first performance because nobody ever recorded it. Things like that I would like to go and see.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But anything that's recorded that you could watch on YouTube or on any of the streaming platforms that were recorded at the time live. But then again, I'm one that doesn't need to see them live, if you know what I mean. If somebody had a recording of those, I would like to see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just old-fashioned that way.
Well, I was going to say there's one song that they did that kept coming up mostly in their shows was the Ying Tong song.
Ying tong, ying tong, ying tong, ying tong, ying tong, pilai po.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's because that was them doing it, not necessarily it was an interlude. It was their song.
Yeah, and Spike Milligan wrote it.
Yeah.
And that was what you call a novelty song. Where
Yes.
it's
It's like the goodies. It's like the goodies. The goodies, goody, gum, gum.
Yep.
Or the funky gibbon. The funky gibbon. We are here to show you how. Yeah, I remember all those because
the goodies are a lot to the games as well, I think.
I've got the goodies show on DVD. Absolutely fantastic. It still holds up. It does.
Absolutely.
The cat and everything. The Ecky Thump. They couldn't get away with doing the Ecky Thump sketches anymore.
There's so much you couldn't get away with doing anymore. Which
Got
is such a shame.
Graham Garden. Was it Graham Garden?
Yeah.
Doing the Muhammad Ali, the boxer. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't get him. You couldn't do that again.
Was it the goodies did the rip off of Wicker's World?
No, Wicker's World was Monty Python.
Oh right, thank you. Yeah, and I know it was one of them. They did Wicker's Island, and everyone was Wicker's. But
Wicker's Island.
No, the nearest the goodies got to do it is when they had Michael Aspel doing the disaster. He was reporting the giant cat and the cat's paws.
Yeah,
Kitten Kong, yes.
Kitten Kong, where the cat just stood in them. Whereas the cat just stood in them when he was reporting it.
Yeah. It's just funny where they got the giant cat paw from. It's apparently with the goodies, it was such an expensive show, I've heard. Because the amount of props they kept using.
Yes, because every show was unique.
Yeah.
They never. It was the only set they had was their room, which was their control center. But they used it 5 minutes of the whole show, and then it was always a different. There were different locations, so they had to make the model for the cat to destroy. Then they had to do the Ecky Thump. They were traveling all over. It was different locations they were in. Then they were always on their 3-seat tandem. So basically, they always had location filming, and location filming is more expensive. For the simple fact is, they're having to go out, get somebody to go out and find the locations. They're having to pay the extras for security so they can block off places and stuff like that. That's why a lot of shows always have a place that they can actually do it, and they don't need to. Like you look at Up the Elephant Round the Castle. They built the set of the street, so they didn't need to actually do it. Whereas things like Bread actually did it on a street and had to basically rent that street and get the people who stayed there not to come in and out of their house. So the difference between Up the Elephant Round the Castle and Bread did it actually on a street, so they would film on a street. Whereas Up the Elephant, they built the street, so they didn't need to do that.
Well,
same as it Emmerdale. They used to film around different places until they built Emmerdale, so they could actually, they didn't have to block off the wee village they were filming in.
Well, I was going to mention one more thing about the Goon Show. They did make use of a lot of radio, like you know, where you had different objects that made sounds, right?
Slowly.
Yeah, that was really brilliant how they did that live.
Yes,
and sometimes they got the sounds wrong.
Well, we know who basically that influenced, don't we? Gary from Erotic. He gets the sounds wrong all the bloody time.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I think we don't have these days, we don't remember these days, is that everybody on the Goon Show had come out of World War II.
Yes.
I mean, to the point that, let's be honest, Spike Milligan's most famous works were his World War II. I had a couple of his World War II autobiographies. I've not read all of them.
Adolf Hitler, my part in his downfall.
Yeah, his part in my downfall. One will gunner who. And then I think they did. I think one of them later when he swapped the titles around. So the other one was Adolf Hitler, my part, and I think they did that. But yeah, they had so that they'd all come out of that. So I don't know how many of them had actually come out of. I don't know off the top of my head how many.
I think the four of them were actually in the entertainment corps.
Yes,
I was about to say
they had. I think most of them had combat experience. So, Spike Milligan obviously was in Libya and stuff like that. I think
he was
and what you call him, Michael Bentine. I think they were Navy, so they served in ships. And Peter Sellers, I don't know where he served in. I think he served in the army. So they all basically had combat experience, but their talent basically got them onto entertainment.
Counterparties, basically.
Yes.
They came out of it ain't our hot one, basically.
And the thing is, with the counterparties, they still went into front line because they were entertaining the troops on the front line.
Yeah.
So even though the ones that were in the concert party still were not that far from the front line.
Yeah.
So they had the experience. It's the same as Ian Fleming. You look at Ian Fleming's James Bond. That was all based on things that he did because he worked in.
Ian Fleming was on one of the boats offshore from the Dieppe raid because he'd helped plan the Dieppe raid.
Yeah, because intelligence, he was an intelligence officer, so the James Bond character came out of his experiences doing things like that.
Yeah, well, but he and Christopher Lee were both naval intelligence.
Yep.
Which is why they, as you said, they bought those out. I mean, to some degree, which is why, quite possibly, ironically, the ideal person to play James Bond might well have been, I don't know, Christopher Lee.
Scaramanga playing James Bond.
Yeah, one of the grads that Christopher Lee was, that James Bond was partly based on, Christopher Lee. or at least a Christopher Lee type person. If you
Yeah.
get my meaning.
The thing is about Christopher Lee, apparently a lot of work he did in World War II was top secret.
Yeah,
Which he
because
couldn't
he had an
say.
interview and somebody asked him, he says, if I told you I would have to kill you, and he laughed, he says, really? He goes, yes. Very seriously, yes. Basically, he was one of the ones that when he said, if I told you I would have to kill you, he probably meant it.
Well, the thing is that with Christopher Lee, a lot of it is apocryphal. A lot of it is not actually known anywhere officially, because it's supposed to be. He's supposed to have been that bit on Lord of the Rings, where Peter Jackson's someone's been stabbing, and he comes up to Peter Jackson and says, I think Peter Jackson, when it tells the story, Christopher Lee comes up to Peter Jackson and says, do you know what it sounds like? Actually, do you know actually what it sounds like when someone's stabbed with a knife? Because I do.
Aye.
They just go quiet, because you go straight to, and because he had been, I'm not sure he's SOE or what, but I know he was intelligence of some sort. Again, these guys had that experience. I mean, across the board.
Yeah.
You got across the board up. I mean, one of the other things that you look back at the golden age of war movies. A lot of the people in those movies had seen the elephant. They'd been there. They'd done that.
Yep.
I mean, when the ironic thing is that if they'd actually done it properly, A Bridge Too Far, there should have been 2 Dirk Bogarde credits. There should have been Dirk Bogarde playing
Dirk
Boy
Bogarde
Johnson.
played against an actor who was playing him.
And then one for the actor that played Dirk Bogarde, because Dirk Bogarde was on him.
Yeah. Did you know the thing is about A Bridge Too Far?
It came to remember is that
See Bridge Too Far. See the bit with the tank. They were standing on the hill overlooking, and the jeep behind them exploded. You remember that scene?
Mm-hmm.
The Germans fired
so they were familiar, amongst other things. They were quite familiar with sort of black humor that gives you.
Yeah, but see the movie. See the scene in A Bridge Too Far where they're standing on a hill overlooking, and the driver comes out to watch as well, and then the jeep behind them explodes and goes up in the air. My friend's dad was the driver.
Wow.
He basically, that's what because he told us, he says, my dad told us that part actually happened. He was the one that drove them, and the only reason he got out of the car is because the officer asked him for the binoculars. He says he walked over, gave him the binoculars, and stood beside him. And behind him, the jeep just went boom and straight up in the air. So that scene basically happened, and my friend's dad was the driver.
One of yes, there's was it brain switched off. Really famous British actor was in Westworld, the TV series.
This TV series, the only one I can remember in Westworld was Yul Brynner.
No, the TV series. He's been a lot of other things. He tells me Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about A Bridge Too Far, the bit where he was actually walking.
Yeah, he's walking across. He was walking across the bridge. He's walking back in the diner and the rest of it. And the guy he's playing
Says
turns around and says,
that.
"Yeah, you don't do that." A British officer walks. He literally had the guy he was playing. But apparently
you can't do that. He says, when I'm doing the scene with all these bullets going off, he says, I thought I had to actually get over there quickly and duck and dive and go behind cover. He says, and the guy says, no, walk with your umbrella.
Yeah.
Quite the thing. Because a British officer doesn't duck.
Well, I mean, we kind of slightly off topic usually, but one thing that always amazed me about things like that as well, about that sort of thing when you look back on it, about the kind of people that they were.
Yeah.
So when it gets to it, there's two reasons about it. Is that you see Jeremy Clarkson did a couple of series about the VCs and the rest of it, and all the way through the one about the VCs, he's telling the story of several VC winners, and he interviewed other people, and he told a story about some guy who won a VC at Arnhem for a ridiculous amount of bits and pieces while they were in the stage and the rest of it. And he ends it and he says, I'd never heard about this guy, and I should have done. I'm married to his daughter. Jeremy Clarkson's father-in-law, or then father-in-law, won the VC at Arnhem and never told anyone about it.
It's as I say, it was a different thing because I remember watching all the war movies and my granda sitting there, and not once me and my dad would talk about the movie. My granda would say nothing. He was at Dunkirk. He swam out. He was told not to. He was told to stay in line, and he thought, "Bug this." Him and his pal dumped everything and swam out to one of the boats. He was at Dunkirk. He was at Higme, and he was a Batman for a lieutenant who was gazetted the same day as David Niven. David Niven, his friend was the Batman for David Niven. He got the other guy. It was gazetted the same day. David Niven, the one that says, "I'll take any regiment except the Scottish regiment," so they put him in the Highland Light Infantry.
Yeah.
HLI. And my grandfather was him and another guy got gazetted the exact same day, and my grandfather was the Batman for the other one. It was a 50-50 shot, and he got the other one. But it's things like that. It's a different generation. Whereas nowadays, when people are talking about their hard, what they did and what they did, and you're sitting there thinking, yeah, you look at all these guys that came back from the war. As you said earlier, a dark humour, but some of them come back with a zany humour because they saw how ridiculous life really was and how cheap life really was. So they came back with a completely different attitude, as in nobody is above ridicule. So they started making serious characters into caricatures, but they made them characters that they could lampoon, but without relying on the caricature of them. Because, like, for instance, a sergeant major, they wouldn't caricature a sergeant major as he was always shouting and bawling. And he always had this sergeant major, even if the goons did a sergeant major, it was a sergeant major. He would shout, but he would turn around and say something that would so ridiculous. But you can imagine a sergeant major saying it. But it was so ridiculous that it was funny. So they would have characters like that, where that they're not caricatures. They're complete and utter serious, but they're saying things that are so ridiculous, they're hilariously funny, because you can imagine, they've seen people saying things like that, and they're sitting there thinking, is this real? And it's so ridiculously funny that they made those type of characters in the show, which made the whole thing.
Well, anyway, it's time to wrap up now. So thank you everyone for tuning in to watching us talk about the Goons and what the Goons influenced onto, like, comedy that came before, and also TV shows, and also talking about past history, about where they originated from World War II and everything else. So overall, if you've never heard of the Goon Show, watch it. Listen to it. Give it a good listen. You'll be laughing your heads off. Now, some of the jokes might not be your forte.
Well, some of the jokes, it's not so much might not be their forte,
but
because of when the jokes were done.
But I know,
they might be It's out of their wheelhouse. It's not. That's what I'm saying. It's not. It might not be their forte because if they like zany humour, they'll love the Goons.
I know.
But they
gonna
might not understand some of the jokes. It's like some of the jokes of the 70s when they were telling the jokes. Unless you knew what Thatcher was, the jokes landed flat. Unless you knew who Arthur Scargill was, jokes land flat because you don't know the people. The same as when they're doing it in America. If they're talking about things that us in Britain have got no idea about.
But what I'm trying to say is that if some of the jokes are not your forte, don't worry about it. Just listen to the interaction, right, of the group. You know, especially when they go off script, especially when things don't go according to plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they break character because they burst out laughing because one of them said a catchy punchline. You know, that's the whole thing, is that it was very funny comedy back then, right? And to me, I think whoever listens to the Goon shows today, it still holds up.
And they'll have Ying Tong in their head for days.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, so wrapping up, we are back on Saturday, aren't we? With Let's Talk Geeky, aren't we?
Let's Talk Geeky. We're going to do a relaunch to see how things go.
Yeah, a proper relaunch.
A proper relaunch to see how things go.
Yeah.
And if everything goes to plan, we'll plan to do it once a month.
Yep. But I brought the matches this time, so they won't.
I'll have my camera back on so I can show you some of my. I've got a box opening specially for Saturday, the 8th. It's a box I've had since just after Christmas. It turned up and it's still not opened. And I've been keeping it specially for the.
I'm still waiting on certain items to arrive. But right, so we'll be back on the 7th of April, won't we, Colin?
No. Are you coming back the 7th? I thought you were going to say the 7th of March, and I was going to say no, it's the 8th.
Yeah, Colin will be back on the 7th of April. You're welcome to join if you want, PJ.
In all fairness, you should have it on the 1st of April.
I said that's when they should be dropping Doctor Who, but no one listened to me.
But yeah, we'll be back on the 7th of April, but this Saturday it's Let's Talk Geeky, recording on both channels.
No, we're broadcasting on both channels.
But anyway, Colin, what have you got coming up?
Not much. It's my usual Friday game on Cosmic Crusades at the moment. And I'll probably be about the internet, some places like Rabbi and Mr. Boone, who have both been insane enough to grant me wrench privileges.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I got to actually post.
The father is actually have been actually saying about me coming back, but
we missed you on Friday, mate. We were talking about you because I can't remember what we were talking about off the top of my head, but I remember said, "Where's PJ when we need him?"
I know I didn't even make the chat because even Friday Night Tights, I caught it after an hour and a half. It'd already been on an hour and a half before I caught it. Busy, as my wife says, it's the busiest I've been, and that's been since I retired. I'm more busy now I've retired than I am.
Yeah, do you actually understand what the word retirement means?
I know it's that bad. I actually created a diary just so I didn't miss anything because I've got so much on. Nights as well as days.
Well, anyway, so thank you everyone for tuning in or watching the catch up. So it was. Thank you, PJ, for being our guest.
It's a pleasure.
But this is I don't know how to wrap up the show with a famous Goon show line, but
based on your background,
yeah,
don't fall in the water.
Aha! Anyway, take care, everybody. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Yada 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 yada, and also like help the algorithm by
Subscribe.
That's it. That's it. But anyway, take care, everybody, and have a fun week and month ahead. And also see you on Saturday for Let's Talk Geeky.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.